Now, on with the show. Our third Bay Area and Silicon Valley resident is Brad Smith. Brad's our final keynote for the morning, and he's a president and CEO of Intuit. Intuit, as you know, is a leading provider of financial applications and solutions for SMBs that Sharad talked about this morning. And so India is going to be a huge market for Brad as he implements a lot of these solutions, because the entire growth, as you might have heard, Brad, for the next 10 years is coming from this SMB business. But what you don't know about Brad is he was in the packaged goods industry. He was with Pepsi and 7-Up and all kinds of brands, and then came over to Intuit in 2003, was part of the management team. He led several successful businesses, became CEO in 2008, and he's now transformed this Intuit into a much bigger company, a global company, which has also a big footprint in India. So please welcome Brad Smith.
Thank you very much. All right, good morning, everyone. There we go. There's some energy in this room. So I'm delighted to be back here in India. We've been here as a company since 2005. We have a large footprint here in Bangalore. We also have a sales office in Mumbai, and we're just getting started. We have about 500 engineers and sales and marketers here, and we're excited about the future. I also want to tell you that one of the reasons why we're so excited is we continue to see tremendous opportunity and tremendous challenge. And that forces us outside of our comfort zone. It forces us to reinvent ourselves and to evolve. And we're also learning a ton inside the company from our new employees. 99% of our employees here in India are actually nationals from India. So we're getting a lot of new learning and new thinking into the company. You may be wondering, well, why is a company here, a multinational company, talking to this audience? There's a book that was just published by Eric Ries. It's called The Lean Startup, and he actually does a case study on Intuit. And he says it's the largest 8,000-person startup he's ever met. And what I hope to share with you today is some of the lessons that we've learned from our mistakes, from our scars, from our journey line, and talk to you about how do you lead in a period where you're basically going through the transformational change that you heard our prior speakers talk about. So there's 3 lessons I'll be talking to you about today. But it really begins with what you've heard this morning. The only constant we can count on is change. We are surrounded right now with an environment where players change every single day. We've got startups coming out of dorm rooms, out of garages. They're being funded by investors that are bidding up the valuations of these companies like we haven't seen since the dot-com boom. You've got a proliferation of new devices. 350,000 new Android devices are produced and published every day. You have people lining up outside of Apple stores across the globe trying to buy the new iPad or iPhone like at a rock concert. And of course, here in the rapidly developing markets like in India, you have innovation and innovators coming out at a pace that we've never seen before. This is not evolutionary change. This is revolutionary change. And there's one thing we can all count on, and that is each and every one of us in this room, regardless of whether we're under the age of 40 or over the age of 40, and I'm not going to tell you what side of the line I fall on, we have got to embrace and lead transformational change. We have got to step up and understand that it's not just about intellectual certainty, it's about intellectual curiosity. And it's about embracing failure just like you embrace success. And so what I want to do today is talk to you about some of the stories that we have lived through as a company, the mistakes we've made, the failures we've made, and as a result, the wisdom we've achieved that hopefully we can pass on to you. There's a great quote from Mark Twain who said that a wise man learns from his own mistakes, but a genius learns from others. And I know I'm sitting in a room of geniuses right now, and I'm going to share some of the mistakes of the less wise, and hopefully that will help you as well. So let me start with the company, Intuit. Now, you heard a little bit about us. I hope some of you have heard of us. Basically, the story I want to tell is about a company that was founded almost 30 years ago. Now, we're one of the older kids on the block. We fall under that line of under 40, but we're 30 years old. In fact, we share a campus. Our headquarters shares the same campus with Google's headquarters, with Larry and Sergey. But I will tell you, before Google, we shared the same campus with Sun Microsystems. And before Sun, we shared the campus with SGI, Silicon Graphics. You might imagine our company has seen a lot of transformational change, business evolution, technological evolution. We've gone from DOS to Windows. We've gone from desktop to the web. And now this wind of change is challenging our reality once again. And we have got to evolve and transform. So I'll just give you a quick from to, and then I'll talk about the 3 lessons that I have taken away from this journey that I hope will be helpful to you. So our company was founded in 1983. This was cool back in 1983. This was cutting edge. Our company founder, Scott Cook, is still with the company, working 60 hours a week. He sat at his kitchen table and watched his wife, Signe, trying to balance a checkbook and struggled. And he said, there has got to be a better way. And he hooked up with a young student from Stanford, an engineering student, and they developed this product called Quicken, the first personal financial management software that had a GUI that basically looked like a check. Now, Quicken did not have first mover advantage. It actually benefited from 47th mover advantage. There were 46 companies that had gone before it. And what Scott tried to do was look for the reasons why they weren't achieving massive success and savor the surprise. Quicken was launched. Here we are 30 years later. It remains the #1 personal financial management software in the world. Now, we've evolved beyond that. We've evolved beyond DOS. Now we're a company that has 50 million customers. We serve SMBs. We serve consumers. We have served their most trusted advisors, the accountants, financial institutions, and we're moving into healthcare. We have a pretty big impact in the U.S. About 40% of all the tax returns in the United States move through our products. Something a lot of people don't know, because small businesses are the backbone of the world's economy, and they are in the U.S., 20% of the U.S.'s gross domestic product, that's $2.6 trillion, flows through QuickBooks, which is our small business accounting product. So we have a pretty significant impact, but we've got so much more to learn and so much more to do. Now, what I'd like to do is talk about how do you go from a company that started out as DOS and end up in a company that is at this stage in its life, and what were the big lessons that we learned along the way. I'm going to capture this under one banner. How do you lead innovation and growth in a rapidly changing world? Now, it's an interesting concept that many of us may often forget when we think about startups. Today, you're starting out with a clean slate. In fact, there's a very popular joke in the Silicon Valley. The joke is, why was God able to create heaven and earth in 7 days and 7 nights? The answer is because he didn't have to worry about an installed base and legacy technology. You can't get there from here. At some point, the land is going to shift under your feet. No matter what bet you bet on today, what platform, what technology, cloud and mobile, one thing is for certain, it will change. And you're going to have to make the change with it, or you're going to be in the history books of those who went before us. So these are the 3 lessons we've learned on how do you make that transformation. I'm going to talk about how do you align and mobilize an organization against a vision. And chances are that vision will have to evolve or pivot as you continue to learn more in your company. The second is, then how do you create a culture where innovation thrives and everybody sees their job as innovation, not just the founder, not just the CEO, but every employee in the company? And then last but not least, how do you make the decisions on how you allocate your resources between what you've already built and what it is you think you're going to have to build to compete with the new startups that are coming out of the classrooms and the dorm rooms? So I'll start first with vision. Now, I have a pretty simplistic definition of vision. For me, a mission is why you wake up every morning. Why do you exist? That's that passion you heard Vinod talking about earlier. If that's your mission, if that's your religion, then a vision is what will it look like when you get there? What is that ultimate destination going to feel like? What does success look like? And there are some key things that I have personally learned as a leader about how to frame a vision. The first lesson actually came from my daughter. My daughter was 8 years old, and in the United States, we, of course, refer to this as soccer, but I understand in the rest of the world it is football. And my 8-year-old daughter had decided later in life she wanted to play football. Now, she came to her mother and I, and she said, look, I know that all my friends have been playing since they were 3 or 4. They're already bending it like Beckham, but I really want to play. And we said, okay, but as parents who wanted to minimize the risk, we found a league that had a bunch of other 8-year-olds who had never played either. So she would at least look like them. And we bought her a new ball, and we got her some new socks, and we wrote her name in magic marker. And, of course, she was a girl, so she wanted a pink and white ball, and we did all that. We showed up at the football field early before the coach. All the other parents were there, and the girls were out kicking the balls, and they started to argue with each other. You're kicking my ball. You've smudged the magic marker on my ball. Now you can't read my name. Mommy, will you come and tell her to stop? The coach shows up, gets out of his SUV, has a net over one shoulder and a bag over the other. Without saying a word to the parents, he walks to the end of the field and sticks this goal at the end of the field. He walks back to the sidelines, and all of a sudden, every kid on the field turned and began kicking the balls. It didn't matter whose ball it was. They kicked all the balls into the net. They jumped up and down, and they high-fived each other like they just won the World Cup. And it became clear to me that our role as leaders is simply to put the goal at the end of the field and get out of the way. Smart people know what success looks like. You don't have to overcoach them. So that's the first part of vision. Now, the question is, well, how do you come up with the right soccer net or the football goal at the end? I had a board member who grabbed me by the scruff of the neck the day that I was stepping into the job and said, I know you've been in the company 5 years, but I want you to listen before you speak. And so I took 100 days and went on a listening tour. And I went out and I talked to our employees, and I asked them these questions. What are the biggest opportunities facing our company that you think we have failed to capitalize on? And then I asked the question, what are the biggest risks that you think are facing our company that if we don't do something about it, we're going to go out of business? And the third question is, what is the one thing I could do to screw this whole thing up? Now, I not only asked our employees, I asked our customers, I asked our top shareholders as a public company, and I went out and talked to 23 CEOs in the Valley, the Silicon Valley, and asked them about our company. I'll tell you what I got, invaluable input, but I also saw patterns. There were themes. And that was the first step that helped me begin to think about what our vision could be. By the way, it also communicated to all those stakeholders that our future would have their fingerprints on it because they were contributing to what our vision would be. Now, the second thing I did is, despite what Vinod said, I talked to experts. We got the Institute for the Future, and they spend time looking at the next 10 years' trends. And I asked them to come in and talk to our leaders and tell us what is going to happen 10 years from now that's going to force us to begin to think differently today. And this was inspired by a great question I heard once at a McKinsey conference. They had CEOs up on the stage, and they asked the CEOs, what was the decision that the CEO 10 years ago made in your company that you're having to clean up now? And man, that was an easy one to answer. Oh, that dummy did this 10 years ago if they'd thought about this. And they said, okay, 10 years from now, what is the CEO going to say they wished you would have done today? That's a little harder to answer, so that's where this came from. But a combination of talking to our employees and customers and getting a view of the future gave me a lot of good insight and input into some of the trends we would have to wrestle with. The third lesson in vision came from this gentleman, President Kennedy. It was once said of President Kennedy, he was better than a good communicator. He was a translator of dreams. He got our emotions riled up. He got our hearts beating faster. In May of 1961, he stood in front of the United States and said, we will have a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth by the end of a decade. And then he got out of the way. He didn't say we're going to build NASA, we're going to get scientists, we're going to create rockets. He put a soccer net or a football goal at the end of the field and got out of the way. And those combinations are the ingredients for a vision. Listen to customers, listen to employees who understand what customers are dealing with, listen to your stakeholders, listen to your competitors, get a view of the future, and figure out how to package it up. And so in 2008, we framed up a vision for a company that had been a desktop software company. We said, going forward, we're going to be cloud. Every dollar, every decision, everything we do will be a connected service. And we will embrace social, mobile, and global. And that is what brought us to India to begin to develop offerings in India for India, and not just to be a US-centric company. So this is pretty basic. This is actually the foundation. The next two are going to be a little more difficult to execute. But from a vision perspective, the message I would encourage you, if you're an entrepreneur, to think about is to understand that a vision needs to inspire action. It needs to get people's hearts beating faster. People want to be bigger. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be a part of a cause. And if you feel that about your product, like Vinod was saying, Find a way to translate that so everybody else knows what to do when you're not there, trying to kick that soccer ball into the net. Now, the second thing, and this is where the entrepreneurial spirit in a big company needs to be as alive as it is in a startup, is how do you create an environment, a culture, where everybody thinks it's their job to help create the next new thing. Now, this is important because not all companies have the benefit of having a genius at its helm. In fact, Warren Buffett, who's one of our great investors in the United States, says he only invests in companies that a monkey can run, because someday, if you wait long enough, a monkey will run it. My company decided to prove that in 2008. So how do you create an environment where culture is everybody's, or innovation is everybody's job? Well, first it begins with this great quote by Peter Drucker. You have to first understand that the bottleneck is always at the top of the bottle. Our job as leaders is not to have the answers. Our job as leaders is to ask the right questions and to help frame a vision, a soccer goal at the end of the field that lets great people do their thing. So how do you set that up? How do you know the answers to the questions you're going to be asking are going to give you the right kinds of responses to help your company be successful? Well, for us, we start with the customer. When Scott Cook founded our company in 1983, he developed a process called Follow Me Homes. Follow Me Homes are when we go into someone's home or someone's business and we observe them for an entire day, wrestle through all the interruptions, struggle through all the Post-it notes, hand out all the cash, and we look for any problem getting in their way of doing their daily task, and then we try to find a way to make it easier. We still do Follow Me Homes 28 years later. We do 10,000 hours a year. I do 60 hours myself each year as the CEO of an 8,000-person company. But what that does is it gets everybody grounded in the same reality of what are the problems we're trying to solve. What's the soccer goal at the end of the field? Then we borrowed from some of the best practices in the Valley. Jeff Bezos from Amazon has a famous quote, "Don't let your team be any bigger than 2 pizzas can feed." 4 to 6 person teams that have the ability to work together, own their outcome, and make all the decisions without any interference from corporate, any interference from the founder. Let them make the call. The second thing we try to do is set up an environment where it's a culture of experimentation. This means that every team has to have a hypothesis. Here's the problem they saw when they followed the customer home. Here's what they think will fix it. And then they have to run a fast experiment with a rough prototype to see if the customer likes the outcome. If they do, they come and ask for money. If they don't even bother to come and ask for money. They run another experiment. The last you already heard talked about from the prior speakers, celebrate failure. We do celebrate failure. We give out Scott Cook Innovation Awards to the top people in the company who've innovated and created something that we didn't have in the company. We also give out awards for a failure because failure leads to experience, experience leads to wisdom, and wisdom leads to success. Thomas Edison, you've all heard the quote, 10,007 times to invent the light bulb. Some young reporter under the age of 35 went up to him and said, "How did it feel to fail 10,006 times?" And he laughed and he said, "I didn't fail 10,006 times. I proved 10,006 ways it wasn't going to work." That's what failure is about, wisdom. Now, that has led us to some very interesting insights in India. I want to share 2 examples of what we're doing in India that you won't even be able to relate if you know our company to anything we've ever done in the United States. When we had our engineers here, they had a passion. Their passion was not to clean up the mess from the West, but actually to build things that would help India be great. And so we dispatched them on Follow Me Homes. They did 300 Follow Me Homes, and we started to notice they weren't going downtown to the merchants. They were talking to farmers. And we said, "Well, what are you talking to farmers for?" And they said, "Brad, 70% of India's small businesses are farmers, and they've got a problem. They're growing their produce. They're trying to get their produce to the right mandi to figure out where they can get the best prices. And either the sun is working against them and their produce is wilting, or they're not finding the right prices, and so they're not making the kind of money they need." And so our team developed a product called Fossil. Fossil is an SMS-based tool. All you need is a cell phone. It connects you to the real market prices happening every day. It allows buyers to let you know the demand they have for a certain kind of produce and the price they're willing to pay. And it's also a social network where farmers can let each other know who's paying the best prices and who's not. 450,000 farmers using it now. 90% of them are getting 20% higher prices for the produce than they were before the product. And it costs them nothing. Another quick example, I know these feel like Intuit commercials. They're not. They're trying to show that we actually have had to break our mindset around what we see in the West versus what we're doing here. We're developing a platform called TextWeb. It's basically an SMS network. All you need is a feature phone, and it enables you to access the internet or to access what we call TextWeb-only content, like Wikipedia or contributions from others, through dialing in a keyword to one national number. You can get access to all kinds of things, government programs, other applications being built by people who are building on TextWeb. A lot of universities right now, we've just given it to the universities, they're building on it. It takes 5 minutes to create a text site. It takes less than 5 hours to build an app for TextWeb. We now have 1,000 apps and 1,000 people contributing, and it's a really neat viral product that we're trying to create to let entrepreneurs have something to build on using the capability that many people in the country have today, which is SMS texting. So these are just two different ways of trying to approach innovation from a company who in the U.S. does not have a lot of farmers to serve and doesn't necessarily focus on SMS because we have a lot of other devices that we work with. So how do you create that environment? The first thing you do is realize the bottleneck's at the top of the bottle. You're not going to have the answers. Get your teams out there, following customers home. Make sure they're on teams no bigger than 2 pizzas can feed. And then make sure they're running experiments, and you celebrate failure as much as you do success. I'm going to wrap up with my very last piece. This is the hardest one of all. When you've got funding, if it's your own funding, it's your parents' funding, it's a VC's funding, or you're in a public company, how do you know when to put $1 into the thing you've already built? Or how do you know when to start to put dollars into the next thing you think you're going to have to build? That's the hardest challenge I face every single day running the company that I run. The best lesson I ever learned actually came from this gentleman. When he was asked, what is the favorite product you've ever built at Apple? Is it the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, the iMac? He said, it's actually all the ones we chose not to build, because that made the ones that we built really great. So the first part you have to do is be willing to narrow in, to say no to lots of things and focus on the most important thing. Then from there, realize you've got 3 sets of resources, and there's only one resource you can't get more of. You can lose 1 times your money and be okay. You can't lose 1 times your time and be okay, because that means you're not here. You can't get more time, and so you have to realize, where are you as a founder, where are you as a leader going to spend your time? And we picked up a very interesting tool that I'll share with you and bring it to a close for questions. Harvard Business Review wrote an article a few years ago by a gentleman named Jeffrey Moore, and he developed this concept called horizon planning. Now, I grew up in a rural part of West Virginia, so I call it crop rotation. How do you actually plant different crops to keep the soil fresh? And horizon planning basically says to think about running your business, even if it's a startup, in 3 chunks. The first chunk is Horizon 1. It's the product you've already started with. It's given you some foundation of success. It's your V1. It's something in the market. The second is Horizon 2. This is that next idea. It may be a feature. It may be a second product that's not as big as the first one, but it has a lot of promise. It's growing fast like a young adolescent. If you feed it a lot, it'll grow. If you feed it too much, it'll get unhealthy and overweight. You have to manage its growth. Horizon 3 are all the new ideas that you want to turn into experiments and quickly see which one of those aren't going to work so you know which seeds to actually water. The big lesson in horizon planning here is for every one that you have in Horizon 1, you should have at least 3 ideas in Horizon 2 and 10 ideas in Horizon 3. Because they're not all going to make it through the funnel. The second piece about horizon planning, which this is more for a larger company as your company becomes successful, is you've got to match the talent to the horizon. Horizon 1 is a team sport. It's like rowing a canoe. Everybody's got to row in unison. If somebody's rowing left and someone's rowing right, you're going to go in a circle. A lot of people like to be on a team, but not everybody does. Horizon 2 is like whitewater rapids. It's an adrenaline junkie. It's people who don't mind falling out of the boat. You got to grab them and bring them back in. And Horizon 3 are for those people who don't mind diving for sunken treasure. They'll go down 10 times. They'll only come up 1 time with gold. The other 9 times they find an empty Coke bottle. But they don't mind it because they love the search. You got to match the talent to the problem. And then the last piece here to wrap it up is you have to measure each horizon differently. When you are a new idea to the far right, at Intuit, we only ask you to prove one thing, the love metrics. Does the customer love the product so much that they started using it, even if it's a rough prototype, and will they tell friends and family members about it? When we handed out the first version of Fossil to the farmers, we then had a V2 we wanted to get out to them. We went out and asked them, can you give us the phone back? And they said, no, I'm good with this one. This one works just fine. We said, no, we got something even better. And they said, that's okay, give me a second phone, but I'm not giving this one up. That's when we knew that we were onto something. And then once you've done that, then you go to Horizon 2, and that's where the Silicon Valley really kicks in. And they want to know how you're going to monetize this. How are you going to make money? We have no idea if we're ever going to make money off of Fossil. What we do know is that it's making money for farmers, and that's fine right now. Down the road, we'll figure out if it doesn't or doesn't monetize. But it works for what we want it to do right now. And then Horizon 1 is obviously when you have to start to deliver a profit. So some of this, I realize, is a chapter ahead of where some companies are. But the lesson that I wanted to share with you is, at some point, the ground is going to shift beneath your feet. The platforms you've built on, the technologies you've assumed, are going to change. And you're going to have to lead a company through transformational change. And how do you do that? How do you write a vision that people get excited about? How do you get out of the way so that all your employees can participate? And how do you start to make the bets on keeping the stuff that you already launched alive while you start to place the bets for the future? The only way that I have learned to get through this world in life is not to be intellectually certain, but to be intellectually curious. To savor the surprise, to make the mistakes, to skin your knees, and to get up and say, that is great. And there is one other lesson I will share, a Mark Twain quote. At 15, my dad was the dumbest man I ever met. At 18, I was amazed how much he had learned in 3 years. So I assure you, as a 30-year-old company, there's something I hope you got out of this. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, we have time for a few questions for Brad. Speak up. Where are the mics? Okay, there's one back here. Is there a mic?
I can repeat
okay,
the question.
can you shout it out, please?
Game-changing things happening in the financial system because there is a
We have to make a call. Should we extend the break by 15 minutes to 11:45 and cut the other session short?
Okay, I think the nature of the question was corruption and greed is set into the financial system. Do we see anything on the horizon that could change that? I would say, first of all, I would separate corruption and greed. I think the motivation for success is a good thing, but put in the hands of those who have ill will are going to make it a bad thing, and that's when it turns into corruption and greed. I think having that desire to do something better and to be a part of something bigger is very important. I would also tell you that I don't think the answer lies in regulation. I think the answer lies in the social network itself, in the environment and the ecosystem, policing those individuals out. I do think there's wins for change. I actually can tell you right now, as I look across the globe, I haven't seen this sort of unsettling unrest with governments and their societies since the 60s. I think people are now looking for something bigger and better than what we've been living by, at least in the West, for the last 20 years. I think that will change. I'm not sure technology will have a part to play in that, but I think our morals and our values and what we will accept of ourselves will have the bigger part to play. And I do think that will change. Call me an optimist, but that's the way I see the world breaking, at least in the United States.
Okay, one right here.
Okay?
this question is about when you just mentioned how to place bets on today versus tomorrow. You listed on 3 resources: time, people, and money. Money being the least. How do you, as a CEO, handle people who have tried putting across their thoughts for tomorrow when their ideas don't get filtered out or be clear about what you need to take. How do you deal with people in that aspect?
Okay, I think I got the nature of the question. How do you deal with the employees whose ideas didn't get picked? Yeah, so this is a really tough one. The first thing we talk about is we have to understand as an organization we can't do everything. And I go back to the Steve Jobs quote, most of our employees admire what Apple has done. And so what you have to learn from that is Apple could do lots of things, I'm sure, great, but they choose to do the few things exceptionally well. And so that's the message we have to get across. The other thing we talk about is no PowerPoint, no persuasion, and I don't care what your business card says. Whoever's product has the best reception in the market from the customer and you bring customer data in is the one we're going to bet on. And so it may not be the prettiest, it may not be the one we thought we were going to do, but if it has the biggest impact, that's the one we'll bet on, because as a company, our mission is to be we're in the business of improving people's lives in such a way they can't go back. And so that's how we break through it. And what happens is the employees understand that. They're highly competitive, but if their product didn't have the same market reaction as somebody else's, they understand why we invested in it. We let the decision-making happen in the marketplace.
Questions? How about from that side, over there?
Hi. I would like to first congratulate you on the Fussell product, because I think that is what the market is dying for, because having been involved in the agriculture side, it's great. But that leads me to a question and also ties into Vinod's topics in the morning about basically making a good idea work. The thing is, Fussell is a great idea. You as a big company are not charging anything for it. You are letting it run in the market. But how do a small startup company comes up with an idea like that, who needs to sustain themselves and still keep going, handle an idea like that? You have a mite of resources which you can put and dedicate a team to let it run for a few years and see what you get. But what would a startup need to do to actually get that kind of an idea out in the market and let it run for a year or a few years and get that kind of backing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to first start by saying even though we're a public company, we're not a philanthropy. I think in a startup world, it comes down to how much conviction do you have for your passion. I think Vinod called it your religion, but your belief that what you're doing is right. And have the patience, as long as it's working for the customer, to know the monetization model will come. I know that sounds a little naive, but I have seen too many times in our company where we gave up too quickly and someone else in the market came in with the same idea and turned it into a wonderful business. We were too impatient. So as long as you see the customers loving the product and telling others, I think the monetization model, you can start to run experiments to figure out how you make money. I would not give up on a product like that. Or I would find someone who's willing to buy that from you, and someone will because they may have deeper pockets and a little more patience because they have the ability to do that. But those are the kinds of products I'm looking for. I have found a lot I can charge for, not a lot that the customers love that much.
Cool.
Yeah?
Sorry, question there?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You mentioned that Intuit India works on trying to solve the problems of
Can
India.
you speak up?
You mentioned that Intuit India works on solving problems in India. When you do that, do you pretty much stick to the financial related services, or you get into other areas like healthcare or education or whatever?
I'm sorry, I missed the second part of the question. So in
Do
India,
you pretty much stick to the financial related services,
yes,
or you get into other problems like education or healthcare?
yeah. Thank you for the
Do
question.
you support ideas in other areas which is not your core competency areas?
Yeah, so we are in the business of improving people's financial lives. It doesn't have to be the way we've done it in the United States. You have a lot of very good companies here that do some of the things we do in the U.S. What we're looking for is we go into a market and look for a big problem that's either undermet or unsolved. And right now, we found one with farmers. And we have found one using SMS texting to create a third-party software development network for people who can't wait for the iPhone to become as proliferated as a feature phone is. I think over time, we are looking at other things. We're in the healthcare business in the U.S. We are in small business products in the U.S., and that may lead us there. But we want to do it when we think the market doesn't have a good alternative, and we will certainly be open to that. We won't go off strategy. If it doesn't have anything to do with financials, then we most likely won't make that decision.
Okay. One last question, please. Okay, go for it.
Yes.
We just request the audience to please stay there while the mic comes around so that everybody can hear the question.
Yeah, so my question for Intuit as a multi-product company. So what is the ratio that you maintain for new ideas, for running existing products, and for mature products? And so what percentage of resources do you align to that?
Okay, so the question was what percentage of resources do we put into the existing products, the new adolescent products, or the ideas that are out here that we haven't proven yet? 60, 30, 10. 60% in existing, 30% in the adolescents, and 10% of our employees' time is unstructured. They can work on anything. We're not the ones who invented it. You've heard about it from Google. Google got it from 3M. Lots of companies have used it. By the way, it's what led to Fossil. It's what led to TextWeb. It's what's led to our last 300 new ideas that have come up through the company. The soccer net at the end of the field and getting out of the way and let them come up with it. There's one rule of thumb, by the way, on the 60, 30, 10. You're not allowed to borrow out of any other horizon and bring it into this one. This is like when we're managing our family finances. You've got to feed your family today, but you have to save for the kids' education in the future. You've got to be able to find a way to do both, and you can't borrow from one to get to the other. And so 60, 30, 10 is our model. Thank you so much.
There's one more.
Okay.
There's one last one. That's
Sure.
Brad, you were talking about making lives easier or financial lives. Now, do you work with other institutions to make this possible, or do you try to do it all alone? The question I'm asking is with respect to the fussel. Do you want to work with micro banking or that level of institutions at the farmer level where it will make a lot of difference to you and to your stakeholders?
Oh, thank you so much for this question. The answer is an emphatic yes, we want to work with other people. In fact, we have borrowed from Procter & Gamble. They built a solution, they built a network called Connect and Develop, and they said they wanted 50% of their ideas coming from outside the company. We want to do exactly the same thing. We call it collaboratory. We'll talk about a problem we have. If anybody else has a solution they want to partner with us, please give us a call. We absolutely want to go after this together. We think solving these problems is a team sport.
great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Appreciate it.
Brad, here's a souvenir of appreciation from NASSCOM.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Thank you. And now we have one, don't leave yet. There's